I asked about the Shia. I was like, who are the Shia? Don't worry about them. Just avoid them. Da da da. You know, it's in their Aqidah to lie. You know, they do taqi all the time. And I was like, whatever, fine. So I left the Shia thing alone.
And we received a sheikh from Sudan. His English skills were limited, but when he moved to the Virgin Islands, he noticed that minority of Shias in the community. And one of the first speeches that he gave was a speech rather critical of Tashayyuh and of followers of Ahl Bayt al-Rasul. So, me being a new convert and me not knowing the difference between Sunni or Shia, when I heard this speech of his, well, it became imperative to me that I should know who are the Shias also, because if they are disbelievers, and if they are as dangerous as the Sheikh is saying that they are, then I should know about them, and I should be on my guard and be wary of them. So I started trying to learn more about Shias after hearing that how dangerous and how kafir and how bad they were. So I wanted to learn more.
They're a Shia family from Middle East, and the knowledge which they provided me, and also not just the knowledge but also the attitude and the way in which they invited me towards the Ahlul Bayt. Many of my Sunni brothers, unfortunately, the way they would try to bring me towards their way of thinking would be to kind of highlight negative points about Shiaism, whether the Shia brothers and sisters would actually, one thing which I'll say, my cousin in Woking, who actually helped me to revert, the first thing he said to me is, whatever you want to do, if you want to, however you want to pray, and whatever belief, whatever books you want to read is entirely up to you. He didn't mind whether I became Sunni or anything. It wouldn't affect our relationship at all, and he would actually be happy for me if I became Sunni. And this, in particular, is what made me think, well, if this is the attitude which I'm being told by the Shia brothers of mine, then perhaps Shiaism has a very good way of thinking, which I like.
عقيدتنا نحن أهل السنة والجماعة ألا ندس أنوفنا فيما شجر بين أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أبدا. لا نقول فعل معاوية، فعل علي، علي أفضل من معاوية، معاوية أفضل من علي، عمرو بن العاص، أبو موسى الأشعري. لا نتكلم في واحد منهم أبدا، وإنما نترك ما شجر بين أصحاب النبي إلى ربهم سبحانه وتعالى، مع إيماننا بأنهم أفضل القرون بإطلاق، أفضل القرون بإطلاق، ثم ندع ما حدث أو ما شجر بينهم لله عز وجل، هو الذي يحكم بينهم.
نعم. This is the Sunni Sheikh of the masjid. He told me, brother, Islamic history is a black and bloody history, and it has no relevance to us today. Don't read it. Being a person who had studied the writings of Marcus Garvey, Marcus Garvey is like a prophet to Rastafarians. Marcus Garvey has a famous saying where he says, a people without knowledge of their history is like a tree without roots. So when this Sunni Sheikh is going to tell me that Islamic history is irrelevant, has no relevance, it's black and it's bloody, don't study it, an alarm bell went off in my mind. I felt that he was trying to keep me away from something. And so this pushed me in the direction to study more.
طب وايه اللي حصل؟ اخطأ جبريل ما خدش باله ونزل على سيدنا محمد بالغلط. قلت لهم طيب يعني يا اخوانا ما فيه رب سبحانه وتعالى اللي ارسله، رب اللي كلف سيدنا جبريل، سكت ازاي الرب ده سبحانه وتعالى؟ يعني ازاي يعني يسكت؟ كيف يسكت الرب على هذا؟ قالوا لا 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 خلاص هو اقر بالامر الواقع. ايه ده بتكلم في ايه؟
Another time they told us at the masjid that when Shias finish their prayer, they say, Khana Amin, Khana Amin, Khana Amin. Amin is Jibra'il. That Jibra'il did khiyanat. That Jibra'il was treacherous. That he went to Muhammad instead of Ali. So when I would hear these things from Ahlul Sunnah, immediately I would go to the Shias and ask them about that. You know, for instance, with this Khana Amin, when I went and prayed with them, When they finished their prayer, I was listening to hear what they said. And surely I heard them say, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
بل إن الرسالة على حد قولهم كانت نزلت على علي فأخطأ جبريل وأعطاها لمحمد.
يا شيخ عمر هذا يحصل في صلاتهم في كل صلاة، كل ما يصلي واحد. لو شفتم أنت في مكة لما بنكون احنا في الحج، فبتلاقي بيعمل كده 1 2 3. هو ماذا يقصد بها؟ يقول فيها تاه الأمين تاه الأمين تاه الأمين، يعني سيدنا جبريل عليه السلام تاه في رسالته، فبدل أن ينزل على علي نزل على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم.
الله المستعان.
I was like, nah, man, that's not true. Oh, but I'm from Yemen. I know the Houthis. Okay, but this is their beliefs, man. You know what I'm saying? Like the classic, Gabriel made a mistake. Gabriel. I was like, nah, man, it's Allahu Akbar 3 times, man. I was like, nah. They're like, yo, you better calm down, Haroon. I want to think you're a Shia. I was like, whatever, man. And
يعني لهم قرآن يختلفوا عن القرآن. أنا هقرأ حضرتك آية بس من قرآن الشيعة أو سنة قرآن الشيعة. مثلا في سورة ألم نشرح لك صدرك، عشان الناس تعرف بس يعني. في سورة الشرح ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك، دي قرآن الشيعة بعلي صهرك فإذا فرغت من نبوتك فانصب عليا وليا وإلى ربك فارغب في ذلك. ده قرآن الشيعة.
إنا لله.
كنت أذهب إلى عدة مساجد ومدارس في موسكو، وبعدين تكلمت مع بعض الأشخاص وعرفت هناك موجود أشخاص يسمون شيعة، وأنا كما كنت أسمي نفسي من أهل السنة والجماعة أو فقط من أهل السنة، كنت أفكر يعني من هم الشيعة؟ نحن أهل السنة، يعني نتبع ماذا؟ القرآن والسنة. والشيعة هم ماذا؟ ما يقبلون السنة، فقط يقبلون القرآن. ورحت إلى بعض المشايخ أو أئمة المساجد في موسكو وسألت واحد وهو معروف صار وإلى الآن هو إمام مسجد في موسكو، قال سألته هل نحن نقبل ونتبع القرآن والسنة والشيعة يقبلون فقط القرآن؟ قال لا، الشيعة القرآن هم في بعض الموارد لا يقبلون. طبعا أنا صدقت هذا الكلام في ذاك الوقت. ليش؟ يعني ما كنت أفكر هو إمام مسجد إما لا يعرف إما يكذب، وهو طبعا الظاهر كذب. لماذا؟ لأنه درس في الأزهر أكثر من 5 سنوات ولا يمكن هو لا يعرف هذه الأشياء، يعني بسيطة، الكتب موجودة. وإذا هو إذا لا يعرف لماذا يقول هذه الأشياء؟ الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول ولا تقف ما ليس لك به علم، يعني أمر صريح، إذا لا تعلم لا تقول. زين، لكن هو قال لي هكذا وأنا تركت هذا البحث. قلت يعني إذا أشخاص ما يقبلون القرآن ما عندي شغل معهم يعني.
So what I used to do is, everything that Ahlul Sunnah would tell me about Shias, I would take it to Dr. Abdul Ghani. Anything that they said to me, I would go there and tell him what they said. I would also watch him very closely. I mean, as an example, they told me that Shias have a different Quran. So when I went to his house, when he wasn't looking, I took his Quran. I took it back to my house and I compared it to the Quran that I had in my own home. And I saw that it was identical. Of course, I took it back to him. I didn't keep it. I took it back to him.
And the bus drove past a Shia information centre. And so I decided to go in and give salams to the Shia brothers there and find out what they said. I'm never content being told by others what these third party says. And I decided to go and talk to them. What I found there was an intellectual discourse about religion, a concern about historiography and accuracy. And thus I'd actually unwittingly found the branch of Islam that suited me. And so I joined the Hausa in Birmingham, and for the next, I think, 5 years, I
actually began looking at Shia Islam first. And then when I compared it with Sunni Islam, decided that the Shia version made much more sense. And so in June of last year, 2006, I accepted the faith, became a Shia Muslim. Now, the question comes, why did I like Shia Islam over Sunni Islam? To me, logic and coherence make much sense. They're important factors in one's faith. What I saw in Shia Islam, looking at the 5 roots of the faith, was a constructive building on foundations. First of all, you have the belief in God. You follow that with an understanding of how God interacts with human beings, the justice of God. Then the next route is that God sends prophets to let mankind know what his requirements are to worship him, to honor him. The next step is that God also sends imams to carry on the message in between the sending of prophets. And finally, that there is indeed an afterlife. To me, that progression made far more sense than the Sunni presentation of the 5 pillars, in which the only basic doctrinal point is that of the fact that God is one. The rest of the points all deal with practice. And the thing that I started mulling over was, how can one base one's faith on a set of practices? It makes far more sense to look at doctrine, and then on the doctrine base your practices. So for me, the 5 roots of Shia Islam made far more sense than the 5 pillars of Sunni Islam.
وكذلك هو في مسند الإمام أحمد بنفس الألفاظ تقريبا. وعند الدارمي في السنن عن زيد بن أرقم قال: قام رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يوما خطيبا فحمد الله وأثنى عليه، ثم قال: يا أيها الناس، إنما أنا بشر، يوشك أن يأتيني رسول ربي فأجيب، وإني تارك فيكم الثقلين، أولهما كتاب الله فيه الهدى والنور، فتمسكوا بكتاب الله وخذوا به. فحث عليه ورغب فيه، ثم قال: وأهل بيتي، أذكركم الله في أهل بيتي 3 مرات.
Why it is that I became a Shia Muslim, and why after 4 years I decided to reject Sunni Islam. The main reason, in fact the 2 main reasons, are based on a single hadith. And this hadith is located within Sahih Muslim. It's in book 31, it's hadith number 5920. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, I am leaving among you 2 weighty things. The one being the book of Allah, in which there is right guidance and light, so hold fast to the book of Allah and adhere to it. He exhorted to hold fast to the book of Allah, and then said, the second are the members of my household, Ahlul Bayt. I remind you of your duties to them, the members of my family, to do this to you, the members of my family.
I began reading it. When I got to the section on Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, I was flabbergasted, stunned, shocked to find out that Imam Hussein had been surrounded at Karbala and killed. I couldn't fathom it. I couldn't believe it, that the grandson of the Prophet, whom even as Sunnis we learn that Prophet loved him so much, that the fact that he was surrounded and killed by Muslims, it shocked me. So this I had to go to the masjid with. And I went to the masjid and I called the Shaykh and I said, Shaykh, you have to explain this to me. What happened at Karbala?
And it was actually around the time of Ashura. And so I was like, okay, what are you doing on Ashura? I'm going to fast, Habibi. I'm going to fast. When did Imam Hussein alayhi salam die? The Ashura? No, yeah. How come you never heard about it on the minbar? I don't know. And he kept it at that. It's insane. It's insane.
من هم هؤلاء الاثنى عشر؟ نقول الجواب على هذا السؤال من شقين. الشق الأول هو الأصل، لا نعلمهم، لأن هذا خبر من أخبار الغيب، لا يتوقف عليه حكم، لا يتوقف عليه حكم، وإنما هو خبر، وإنما هو إيش؟ خبر. هذا أمر، ولذلك عرفناه أو لم نعرفه لا يترتب عليه شيء.
12 خليفة كلهم يكونون من قريش. طيب تعالوا نعد يا جماعة. هذا أبو بكر، هذا عمر، هذا عثمان، هذا علي، هذا من تولى بعد علي تولى الحسن 6 أشهر، ثم تولى معاوية، ثم تولى يزيد بن معاوية، ثم يلا وامش امش امش على الخلفاء يمكن وتعالي لو خلفاء بني أمية وخلفاء بني العباس، يعني دولة بني أمية أو بني العباس استمرت 600 سنة، الدولة العثمانية شوف كم استمرت. طيب هل هذا يا جماعة؟ طيب الآن يمكن قرابة 5,000 خليفة يمكن.
12 caliphs? Who in this hadith says there'll be 12 caliphs after me, all from Quraysh. Who are the 12? But this guy down the street can name me 12 like that. Oh, no, don't listen to them. You know, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Muawiyah, Yazid. I'm like, okay, sure.
The more I started to research about the topics, about the imams, about the followers of the Prophet, about the Prophet himself, the way he used to pray, things like this, and issues, beliefs, topics, stories, everything. Eventually, I came to the realization that Shiaism and the way in which they followed the imams after the Prophet, and the imams themselves were such inspirational people in their time. Even to this day, their sayings, their stories, and what they stood for still stands in the modern day. The way that they stood up against injustice, the way that they fought for the weaker people in society at the time, is just such a fantastic example of how human beings should be. How can I follow anyone else except the Ahlul Bayt, who are by far, in my entire life, I've never seen a more perfect example of how a family, how people should be in life, not just religiously, but also in society, the way that they act to people and the way that they are with everybody on this planet. So in the end, it was really down to studying more about the imams, studying more about Shias themselves, and listening to the debates and discussions between Sunni and Shia, which really led me to believe that Shia was the one for me, because my beliefs were far more similar to Shia than to the Sunni. And although we are all Muslims at the end of the day, the way that I choose to follow God is the way in following Imam Ali alayhi salam.
And so I read Then I Was Guided. And the way Dr. Tijani went about it, how he would only take hadith that both sides agree on, and of course the Quran. So I was like, you know, that sounds pretty foolproof. So I did it, and I would just, even before I accepted Shia Islam, I would be defending the Shia. Like there was a Yemeni deli they used to support my dawah, so they had like pamphlets and they gave out all the Qurans, and so I was like, no, man, I'm telling you, they pray towards Karbala. And that was actually the first question when I got to Masjid al-Bayt. I was like, what direction, what city is that? The Kaaba, or Mecca. That's not Karbala? No, where do you, come on. Our Qibla is the Qibla. And it just blew my mind. It just blew my mind.
So certainly because of Tashayyu being more logical, having more reasonable answers, in addition to the irrefutable proofs that exist in Quran, in Ahadith, in history, we became a Shia. However, that thirst for knowledge had been ignited now. I had been through this period where running between the Sunni Masjid and the Shia Center and talking and asking and investigating and perusing and studying. Now I decided to myself, no, I won't be led astray anymore by this person or that. I want to go and study for myself. And so this is what opened this chapter in my life.
يا حيدر يا حيدر واليناك واليناك يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعناك يا حيدر يا حيدر واليناك يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعناك يا حيدر يا حيدر واليناك يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعنا وبيك منا للحب اكثر بالجنة بايعنا وبيك منا للحب اكثر بالجنة يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر اسمك مطبوع في دلالي يا مولاي حاء ويا ودال وراء اسمك مطبوع دلالي يا مولاي حاء ويا اسمك يا الغالي آية آمالي نبض الدلالي بنبض الدلالي اسمك يا الغالي آية آمالي نبض الدلالي نبض الدلالي حبينا حبينا يا حيدر يا حيدر ما ننسى ما ننسى يا حيدر يا حيدر حبينا حبينا يا حيدر يا حيدر ما ننسى ما ننسى يا حيدر يا حيدر النبض يردد حبنا للحب اكثر بالجنة النبض يردد حبنا للحب اكثر بالجنة يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعنا بايعنا يا حيدر يا حيدر والينا والينا يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعنا بايعنا يا حيدر يا حيدر والينا والينا يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعنا وبيك آمنا للحب اكثر بالجنة بايعنا وبيك آمنا للحب اكثر بالجنة يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر حبيناك من الذر واحنا ما نتنازل كل عضايب جسمي تردد انت الاول حبيناك من الذر واحنا ما نتنازل كل عضايب جسمي تردد انت الاول يا وارث طه فطره عرفناها حبتك شايفناها حبتك شايفناها يا وارث طه فطره عرفناها حبتك شايفناها حبتك شايفناها نادينا نادينا يا حيدر يا حيدر ظن هو يا حيدر يا حيدر ناديناك ناديناك يا حيدر يا حيدر ظن هو يا حيدر يا حيدر نقدر يا حيدر صحنا للحب اكثر بالجنة نقدر يا حيدر صحنا للحب اكثر بالجنة يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعنا بايعنا يا حيدر يا حيدر والينا والينا يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعنا بايعنا يا حيدر يا حيدر والينا والينا يا حيدر يا حيدر بايعنا وبيك آمنا للحب اكثر بالجنة بايعنا وبيك آمنا للحب اكثر بالجنة يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر لو يتحلل دمي فينا وتعرف حبي كل قطرة دم تنبض حيدر يشهد ربي لو يتحلل دمي بينا وتعرف حبي كل قطرة دم تنبض حيدر يشهد ربي انت ابوي اجداني حبك قرآني معبد ايماني معبد ايماني انت ابوي اجداني حبك قرآني معبد ايماني معبد ايماني وعرفنا يا حيدر يا حيدر نبقى وياك نبقى وياك يا حيدر يا حيدر وعرفناك يا حيدر يا حيدر نبقى وياك نبقى وياك يا حيدر يا حيدر لو آخر نطق نطب دمنا للحب بدرب الجنة لو آخر نطب دمنا للحب بدرب الجنة يا حيدر يا حيدر يا حيدر يا يا حيدر ضايعنا وبيك منا